Good morning.
In unison, good morning, Your Honor. Good morning.
Mr. Mesereau.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
In unison, good morning.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I would like to clarify some statements I made yesterday, correct a couple of statements, and talk a little bit more about a few other things I mentioned. First of all, the prosecutor, in his opening statement, made an allegation that Mr. Jackson had intentionally, knowingly provided alcohol to a child on a flight from Florida. You will learn in the trial that on that private flight were Mr. Jackson, two of his children, his physician, security personnel, and other guests, as well as the Arvizos. And you will hear from his physician that he was in a seat on that plane where he could see everything and never slept. And he never saw anything like this so-called licking that the prosecutor described. But in that regard, you need to understand that the charges in this case involving alcohol are not charges like a bartender giving an underage kid alcohol. The charges are that Mr. Jackson gave alcohol for the purpose of molesting. The alcohol charge is directly tied into allegations of molestation. One doesn't exist without the other in those alcohol charges. And Mr. Jackson absolutely denies that. In that regard, we will prove to you, through witnesses, people who worked at and visited Neverland, that the Arvizo kids, at times, were out of control, broke into the wine cellar, were caught drinking alcohol themselves, without Mr. Jackson even being present or knowing about it. They also were caught breaking into the refrigerator in the kitchen, drinking alcohol, and they were caught grabbing alcohol from a cupboard. There is one witness who will tell that you Mr. Jackson ordered some alcohol for he and guests and the children stole it. They were caught intoxicated. They were caught with bottles. Mr. Jackson was nowhere around. We will prove to you that they are now trying to say that he was behind all of this. And it's false. We also will prove to you that the Arvizo children, as I said before, initially seemed very well behaved, but that changed. And it changed radically. For example, there are workers who are in charge of the amusement rides. There is a Ferris wheel. There are other carousels that children, when they visit Neverland, ride on and play on. One of the workers in charge of those rides will tell you that he's not sure how this happened, but they appeared to have memorized the codes to start those rides. And he was shocked and horrified to find the kids on a Ferris wheel up at the top throwing objects at elephants and people. They also, we will prove, did that with various codes in the house. They somehow found a way to roam around the house at will when Mr. Jackson wasn't even in town and were actually caught in his room. Those witnesses will testify to those facts. They were out of control. The prosecutor told you that there were girly-type magazines and sexually explicit material in Mr. Jackson's home, and there were. Mr. Jackson will freely admit that he does read girly magazines from time to time. And what he does is he sends someone to the local market, and they pick up Playboy and they pick up Hustler, and he has read them from time to time. He absolutely denies showing them to children. And, in fact, the magazines the prosecutor referred to were in a locked briefcase. And Mr. Jackson will tell you he found those kids going through his magazines, and grabbed them from him and locked them in his briefcase. That will be proven at trial. I want to emphasize that Mr. Jackson was paid nothing from Bashir. The original negotiations were that money would go to charities in England. They were talking about £250,000, British pounds they are. That, from Mr. Jackson's point of view, the incentive for doing that documentary was that he trusted Mr. Bashir was going to present him in an appropriate and honorable and honest light. And that's not what happened. Yesterday, I mentioned Mrs. Arvizo, while she said she was falsely imprisoned, going for a body wax treatment. I checked the receipt, and I mistakenly said February 14th. It's February 11th, for the body wax. What is particularly significant about that, other than the fact that it's hard to believe while you're being falsely imprisoned you're going for a local body wax? The significance is this. She, at her own request, was driven from Neverland to a salon. She was gone for about 3 hours. She was left at the salon alone. She was there for over an hour getting a treatment, when she says she was falsely imprisoned and couldn't communicate with anyone. That is the significance, and that is absurd. On that particular day, some very odd things happened. Her boyfriend and now her husband, as I mentioned, was a Major J. Jackson, who's in the Army Reserve, and he was making approximately $8,000 a month while she was accepting welfare. And he was allowing her to deposit her welfare checks into his account. And as I said to you yesterday, she was not disclosing his income or support in any of her requests for public assistance, which were under oath. On that particular day, Major Jackson spoke to her on the phone, and something strange happened. In between the body waxes and whatever else she was doing at Neverland, she claims and he claims that she said she had trouble at Neverland and that he called 911. But when he told her that he had called 911, she said, "I'm not having trouble. We don't need 911. So the opportunity to call 911, to call the police, to call the military police, was always there. She says she was kept from these people during all of this false imprisonment by some conspiracy she claims was engineered by Michael Jackson. And that's false. On that note, we will prove to you, ladies and gentlemen, that during the period she says she was falsely imprisoned, she had access to the Los Angeles Police Department, and was, in fact, in contact with police officers in the Los Angeles Police Department who she associated with, and never raised an issue about false imprisonment. She was in contact with Major J. Jackson, who also had access to the military police, and no complaint was made. She went to a federal building in Los Angeles to get a passport for the trip to Brazil. That federal building was loaded with federal employees, federal agents. Nobody was told there was a problem. She had access to the Department of Children and Family Services in Los Angeles because they interviewed her. Where? At J. Jackson's home. Did she complain? "We're being falsely imprisoned. We're being abducted. We're being pressured. We're being defrauded. My children are at risk"? No, never. All of this during the period that the prosecutor says the family was being abducted, falsely imprisoned, children were being harmed, etc. I told you yesterday that Michael Jackson flat out denies these molestation allegations. They are false. Now, the prosecutor told you that Ms. Arvizo and her children will come in and say there was molestation. They gave you this lurid discussion of masturbation and things of that sort. Well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the Santa Barbara sheriffs raided Neverland. Approximately 70 officers showed up.
Excuse me, counsel. I'm going to object as argumentative.
Sustained.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Arvizo children's DNA was never found in Mr. Jackson's bedroom after searching and testing. Their DNA isn't there. Because the molestation claims are fiction. I did mention yesterday that Mr. Jackson owns approximately 1 million books. He does, but I think I may have suggested that they were all in his house. Actually, a lot of them are in storage. So I want to make sure that's clear. But he is a voracious reader and book collector. I also indicated to you that the prosecutors initially had filed a complaint against Mr. Jackson alleging that molestation had occurred, based on what the Arvizos told them before the Arvizos did the rebuttal tape praising Michael Jackson saying he never did anything wrong. And you'll see it in the trial. And also before they were interviewed by the Los Angeles Department of Children and Family Services where they repeated their absolute denials that he'd ever done anything wrong. They did nothing but praise him to the hilt. And what I said to you was after the reality of those statements set in, the prosecutors changed the dates of the alleged molestation and now they're supposed to have occurred after those interviews. And as I said to you, this is a time when the media and Mr. Snedden's investigating, and everybody is talking about this Bashir documentary, and the networks are coming out to see if they can vie for the ability to do a rebuttal tape. This is when they're claiming these acts of molestation occurred. They didn't. Now, Mr. Snedden, the prosecutor, said to you, Janet Arvizo doesn't want money. She's not doing this for money. Well, we will prove to you the following. As I said yesterday, when she allegedly learned of these molestation claims, she didn't go to the police, she went to a lawyer. And I just mentioned to you that she was in touch with various members of the Los Angeles Police Department during this period of so-called false imprisonment, this period of a so-called conspiracy by Michael Jackson and his associates. One of those police officers will testify that Janet said to him, "Something big is happening, and I got a lawyer." That's number one. Number two, as I said to you yesterday, she realized at some point that going to a lawyer first doesn't look too good. And that's when she began to claim that she learned about it from the police, not the lawyers. The problem is that the lawyers are the ones who eventually went to the police. So you'll have to figure that one out. Janet Arvizo told the Santa Barbara sheriffs in one of her interviews, "You know, my kids have till the age of 18 to file civil suits." And she was correct, because someone underage who has a claim is not held to what is called a statute of limitations the way adults are. A statute of limitations, as many of you know, is a certain period of time you have to sue if you have a claim, or your claim gets stale. It gets thrown out, because they don't want. Basically the law says that people can't go sitting around forever waiting to file claims, or the whole system would be chaotic. So the statutes of limitation have been defined by the legislature. And they give time periods during which somebody can sue. For her children, the alleged victims of molestation, they have till 18. And she told that to the police, just as she told the police that she had hired lawyers. Why did she tell that to the police? And why in her police interviews, as we will prove, did she repeatedly say, "I need money, I want money," or words to that effect? Ladies and gentlemen, we will prove to you the relationship between a criminal prosecution and a civil claim for damages based upon the same type of alleged conduct. What am I referring to? I think some of you know this already, but we're going to prove it to you anyway. Here's what it is. There is what is called a burden of proof in a criminal case, and that is, you must prove beyond a reasonable doubt the allegations are true and that the defendant's guilty. In a civil case, what is called the burden of proof is lighter. It's easier. It's called preponderance of the evidence.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this.
Sustained.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will prove that Janet and her children are using this case to win a civil case.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that as argumentative.
Sustained.
We will also prove that her lawyer, Larry Feldman, who the prosecutor acknowledged had sued Mr. Jackson a long time ago, a lawyer very well known in Beverly Hills, California. We will prove to you that this lawyer was having lunch with CNN talk show host Larry King and told him, "She wants money." Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecutor yesterday alleged that acts of molestation occurred during certain dates. We will prove to you that most of those dates, not all of them, but most of them, Michael Jackson wasn't even near Neverland. Based upon our investigation, we can find 4 approximate dates where he was at Neverland. But a lot of the dates you heard the prosecutor identify, he isn't even near the place. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about these conspiracy allegations, particularly as they relate to the so-called co-conspirators that Mr. Jackson is supposed to be aligning with for the purpose of committing felonies. The first thing you need to know is what they're saying is that Mr. Jackson committed crimes by agreeing with others to commit crimes, so-called co-conspirators. And the prosecutor identified who those co-conspirators are supposed to be. And indeed, in the charging document, Judge Melville read you their names. Schaffel, Dieter, Konitzer, Cassio, Amen. You know that none of them have been charged. Do you know that the only one they charged with conspiracy is Michael Jackson?
Your Honor, I'm going to object as argumentative.
Counsel. It is really, the way you're saying what you're saying is argumentative form of, you're not saying, "We're going to prove this, we're going to prove that."
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. We will prove to you that none of those so-called co-conspirators have been charged with any crime. The only one these government prosecutors have pointed out is Mr. Jackson when it comes to these conspiracy allegations. As I said to you yesterday, Mr. Jackson has a certain lifestyle and presence that attracts all kinds of people on a continual basis who seek to profit at his expense. It's an ongoing problem. It's an ongoing issue. He is one of the world's best-known megastars. He's known as a musical genius, one of the greatest in the world. And he's known around the world as someone who's made lots of money. This is the reputation people come to him with and they want to profit from it. And you can just guess at the characters who show up trying to get their nose under the tent with an idea. An idea for a concert.
Your Honor, I'm going to object again as argumentative.
I will change that, Your Honor.
Rephrase it.
We will prove to you that Mr. Jackson, because of his presence around the world in the music industry, continually attracts people who seek to profit. We will prove to you, ladies and gentlemen, that this creates a problem in his life. And here is the problem we'll prove to you exists. Mr. Jackson is an artist. That is what his primary work is. He's an artist. He is called a musical genius. He is a creative person who dances to a creative drummer. Mr. Jackson was interviewed by Mr. Bashir about how he lives, how he feels, and how he works. And among other things, he responded to Mr. Bashir's questions along those lines. He said, "I have to be inspired. I can't wake up each day and say, today I have a goal. I'm going to create music. I'm going to create choreography. I'm going to create a video. I'm going to find the message. I'm going to translate it into music and choreography. This is what I'm going to do today." He told Mr. Bashir, "I can't do that. That's not the way it works. I have to be inspired. I don't know when I'm going to be inspired. I have to make myself open for inspiration in order to do the kind of work I do. And to do that, he has to live a certain way." For example, Mr. Bashir expressed surprise when he said to him, "I have a tree on my property." And lots of times I go up and I sit in the tree alone. And I'm peaceful and I'm still, and I meditate. And very often God gives me that creative spark that I need to do the work that I excel in. We will prove to you that Mr. Jackson will often wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning at Neverland. He will walk out of his house alone, and he will take a walk alone under the stars, under the moon, under the sky. He will meditate in his own way, and wait for ideas and inspiration to come. And he often says when it comes to dance or music, I can't think my way to the result. It has to come to me, and I have to feel it. This is his lifestyle, we will prove. And one of the problems, we will prove, is that if you're going to be that kind of a creative genius, it doesn't always leave time to sit down with lawyers and accountants and business advisors on a regular basis. In fact, he has said, when I spend time in those areas, I create less. What does that mean, ladies and gentlemen? It means he's vulnerable to being taken advantage of financially and legally. And we will have witnesses tell you, they have observed him presented with documents, and he signs them without reading them. And this type of behavior has caused problems in the past for him. But he is the creative spirit he is, and he has to live the way he lives. And he doesn't live like a criminal, as they have told you. At one point, a number of individuals approached him, were able to actually get face to face with him and convince him that they could help him out with his affairs. Of course, this has been going on for years. This has been going on, we will prove to you, since he was a child. Because he began performing at the age of 5. And by the age of 8 was being recognized for his genius and his talent. That's an early age, and he and his family, were working with studios like Motown, where they got a big break. And as part of the business of music, they were told, we have publicists, press people, agents, managers. They will tell you what to say. Image is business. Image is critical. You can't just walk out there and freely discuss your feelings, your life, what you do, what you like or don't like. We'll tell you what to say, and you'll say it. And things like personal habits, personal fears, personal idiosyncrasies, were hidden, because, after all, this was big business. You heard the names Konitzer and Dieter. They did arrive, and they did claim they were going to somehow rescue Michael Jackson from this world of charlatans and profiteers, and would be do-gooders with a hand in his pocket. They also revealed who they were during the course of his experience with them. The prosecutor would have you believe that Mr. Jackson was somehow involved with these people on a daily basis, getting all kinds of information from them and knew everything they were doing. He did not.
Your Honor, I'm going to object as argumentative.
Overruled.
He didn't. This is what Dieter and Konitzer were planning to do with regard to Mr. Jackson. Now, as for his involvement, referring to Michael Jackson, Michael is an entertainer and not a businessman. He does not like business. He does not care about any formalities, proper procedures, detailed briefings, etc. Any one of those elements kills his creative energy. He wants to stay out of that. That is the reason why he gave us an extensive power of attorney. Do you know what a power of attorney is, ladies and gentlemen? I'm sure some of you do. Maybe you all do. It's giving away to somebody an ability to sign for your affairs and represent you in signing things and doing things from a legal point of view. It's a very serious act when you give someone a power of attorney. But they got one out of Michael. They said further, his intention was definitely not being bothered with signatures here and there, every other day, and with personal meetings with each and every member of the team. We realized that some might feel insulted, but it's not personal. Signatures in meetings with Michael will, in general, not happen. Only in very special cases, exceptions will be made. We will prove to you that these so-called business advisors made a concerted effort to keep Michael Jackson away from a lot of what they were trying to do on his behalf and to control his affairs, particularly the music business. On January 11, 2003, this is what one of them wrote. Yes, I and Mr. Wisner, whom you met in Las Vegas, are authorized to engage you. We shall gain control of financial affairs, records, documents, agreements, and also operations, anything else belonging to Michael Jackson in their possession or control. They identified 2 phases of activity they were going to pursue. 1. Takeover. 2. Cleanup operation, clean up old business. And they said they were going to create what they called the Michael Jackson universe. This was their business proposal for managing and controlling all of Michael Jackson's business, while he spent his time creating and writing and choreographing in the things he loves to do. We will prove to you that, unlike what you were told, he didn't know a lot of things they were doing, because they intended that he not know what they were doing. And they weren't telling him a lot of what was going on. We will also prove to you that a lawyer named David Legrand was, at one time, retained to help Mr. Jackson. David Legrand had been a securities law prosecutor. As a securities law prosecutor, we will prove that he had prosecuted people for financial crimes, stock fraud, not following proper procedures and disclosures if you're selling stock or securities. Things of that sort. David Legrand began to smell that something was wrong, and he confronted Dieter and Konitzer with his suspicions, even writing to them and saying, "Why are you withdrawing money? Who told you to do that? Who gave you permission? Where's it going? What are you doing with it?" They then were able to convince Michael Jackson to fire Legrand. But before that happened, David Legrand commenced an investigation into the activities of these alleged co-conspirators, Dieter, Konitzer, Schaffel and others. He hired a top-flight investigative firm in New York to check out their backgrounds, to check out what they were doing, to see if they were hiding things overseas, to see if Mr. Jackson was being, as he said, defrauded, and to see if they were engaging in acts as what he described as self-dealing. But they were able to get to Michael and stop the investigation by getting him to fire Legrand, because they convinced him that Legrand was doing something wrong. An investigative report was prepared. It wasn't completed, but it was prepared. It was printed and it was given to Mr. Legrand. Mark Schaffel, the prosecutor, told you that Mr. Jackson was a partner in his business. We will prove to you he was never a partner in his business. Mark Schaffel was a film producer who had met Mr. Jackson in the early 90s. And at one point Mr. Jackson said he wanted nothing to do with him. That was in writing from his attorneys. Mark Schaffel, like so many others, wanted to do business with Mr. Jackson. And typically, as we will prove, when people are on the outs, they band with other people on the outs and look for a way to get back in. They look for a way to glom onto somebody who has Mr. Jackson's ear during the limited time he has to deal with these things. And Mr. Schaffel came forward with a proposal that a rebuttal show be done with Fox. Mr. Schaffel travels to Brazil all the time. Mr. Schaffel has friends in Brazil and production facilities in Brazil. And Mr. Schaffel convinced Janet Arvizo that she should come to Brazil, because Michael Jackson was going to be with them in Brazil. And she was all for it. We will produce witnesses who will tell you that Janet Arvizo was very excited about going to Brazil. Her children, apparently, weren't excited, because they wanted to stay at Neverland. But we will prove to you through witness testimony that she was very happy about going to Brazil until she concluded that Schaffel and Dieter and Konitzer and others were somehow trying to profit off Michael Jackson and keep her out of the profits. That's when all these new claims began to surface. And when she decided not to go to Brazil, she didn't go to Brazil. When she decided not to go to Brazil, Mark Schaffel went to Brazil anyway. Because that's where he was planning to go all along. We will produce witnesses who will tell you that she was excited about this vacation. She thought she was going to be with Michael Jackson. And one of the constant themes I've been articulating to you is that when she realized Michael wasn't going to be there taking care of the family the rest of their life, her attitude suddenly changed. And when she realized she couldn't make millions of dollars one way, she looked for another way. And here we are. I was going through a chronological description yesterday of events, and we were into February of 2003. I told you that the Bashir program had aired in the United States on February 6, 2003. I also told you, ladies and gentlemen, we would prove that that's the day that Prosecutor Snedden announced he was investigating. And according to this prosecutor, a little over a month after he starts investigating, and Michael Jackson learns about it, he suddenly begins to molest. It's false and absurd. I told you that 2 days later, on February 8, 2003, Ed Bradley at 60 Minutes arrived at Neverland with his film crew. Also present was the president of CBS Entertainment, Jack Sussman, attorney David Legrand, whom I just mentioned to you, the one who began investigating the backgrounds and the activities of these alleged co-conspirators, and attorney Mark Garrigus. Now, attorney Mark Garrigus you've heard about because he's been in some high-profile cases in California. And he had been contacted by Mr. Legrand because Mr. Snedden had started an investigation. He was at Neverland that day also. That's February 8th. On February 13th, Janet Arvizo has a phone conversation with Frank Cascio that is recorded, without her knowledge. And I'd like to tell you a few of the things she said in that phone conversation February 13th. She didn't like those German people, she said, and of course she was referring to Dieter and Konitzer. She said to Frank Cascio, "I love you so much. You don't know how much I love you. Your little sister and your little brother." Janet Arvizo. "Yeah, It's like we're family, you know, Frank. Frank tells her, and to protect Michael, because we've been in this situation many times, Janet. And you know what? It ends up hurting the kids, and we don't want. And Michael does not want Gavin to be hurt. Janet, as I said yesterday, has been complaining that the media are harassing her. And that her son, who was in the Bashir documentary, is being hassled at school. She has requested security help and she has gotten it. We will prove to you now she has converted all of this into this notion of being imprisoned. Janet. Oh, I know. That's why I'm getting all those information. Oh, for example. There was like a year and a half ago they did an investigation of me and David. David, of course, is her ex-husband. We understand that Michael Jackson and Chris Tucker are involved with you and the kids. And they said, and the kids spoke up and they said, they're family to us. If we didn't have Michael, we wouldn't have a father figure in our life. And then the social worker, referring to the Department of Children and Family Services. Okay. I'll give the person here a call. Name, David Arvizo. And she documented it and everything. So I'm returning the note paper so you can have all these papers. She continually says, Michael is our father. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Jackson will tell you one time at Neverland he got a very bad feeling and intuition. They were in the theater that you've heard about. There is a theater at Neverland, where you can just go in, and kids can have their seats. It's on an incline. You got a stage and you got a big screen. He was there with Janet Arvizo and the 3 kids, Gavin, Star and Davelin. And all of a sudden, Janet Arvizo grabs Michael's hand and has her children all hold hands, and she says, let's all kneel down and pray with our daddy Michael. And Michael Jackson got a very bad feeling. And after that, he concluded, I got to get away. I love helping this child, but something is wrong. And we will prove to you that he was warned by others, get away. Janet Arvizo continues in that recorded phone conversation, I know we're family, Frank. Me. You, me, my kids, our family. You, Marie Nicole, my kids, baby Rubba, our family. Michael, Marie Nicole, you, me, our family, and my parents, that's all I got. So that's why these German people, and it's inaudible what she says, but presumably it's not too kind. She is sensing that Dieter and Konitzer, the ones who wanted to take over Michael's business, are keeping her away from Michael, the daddy figure, the one who's supposed to rescue her family from all of their troubles. Further on, she says to Frank Cassio, so I told the German people, but you don't understand. He's family to us and we're family to him. And and he goes, your kids are unimportant, you know. Michael's family to me. My kids call him, Daddy Michael. Yesterday the prosecutor told you he would prove that Michael wanted this. Nonsense. Frank Cassio. Michael wants to see you. Janet Arvizo. Tell him he's our family. Frank Cassio. You don't have to talk to him. Janet Arvizo. I thought, like everything, my family was in jeopardy. Frank Cassio. No. Janet Arvizo. Meaning us being with Michael and Michael being with us. She fears that relationship is ending. Ladies and gentlemen, we will prove that 3 days later, the Arvizo family are interviewed by Brad Miller, a licensed California investigator, employed by attorney Mark Garrigus. Now, Mr. Garrigus at this point was concerned about who the Arvizos were, and what they were up to, and what they really were trying to accomplish. During this period of alleged false imprisonment, the investigator visits them at their home. Does Major J. Jackson of the Army Reserve call the police? No. They have an interview with the investigator that is tape recorded. Again, 3 days after that phone conversation with Frank was recorded and she didn't know it was being recorded. Okay. She starts talking about her son's cancer. Janet Arvizo. To this day it's an unknown cancer. And it's been declared that by multiple laboratories and a team of 12 doctors. And she talks about her son's internal organs that have been removed. Left adrenal, kidney, tip of his pancreas, spleen, lymph nodes, etc. The investigator says to her, okay. Thank you. And what was Mr. Jackson's role in his recovery? Janet Arvizo. Like a father to him. Investigator. What would Michael do? Janet Arvizo. Everything a loving father, unselfish, kind, inaudible, then, exhibits unconditional love. She goes on. And that's one thing the role Michael was. There's not. He wasn't just a father figure to Gavin, He also was to Star and Davlin, because he knew all three of them needed him. And he was, is family to me, and he also realized that I needed him. This is when she's living with her boyfriend, whom she later married. Janet Arvizo. We go on further, yes, and all, David's role, her ex-husband, to make sure he appeared to be a good father to people, because he knows of the harm that he placed on me and my children for years. How long were you married to David? 17 years. I'm living. We're legally separated, pending divorce. And then she talks about her being the victim of domestic violence by the ex-husband. I remind you, in the J.C. Penney deposition, she said he had never touched her, under oath. She talks about her ex-husband committing acts of child endangerment and terrorist threats. Sound familiar? Then Gavin says about his father, he hit me during my cancer treatment. Even when I had surgery, he hit me a lot. Star Arvizo. He used to hit me in the head a lot and used to always kick me. Davlin. He would throw us against the wall and he would yank us by the hair. Davlin. My mom has bald spots resulting from my father. Then Janet talks about how he would abuse their dog and their pet ferret. Continuing with Janet Arvizo in this conversation that she knew was recorded. No, I'm just a regular person, Brad. I had to live with him for 17 years. And for 17 years I wished that one day me and my children were going to be delivered from this evil. And when Michael came into the picture, I knew that Michael was kind and gentle and a loving person, and he too had to be delivered from him. Continuing. Janet Arvizo. Yes, he went. They had filmed. When they had filmed the beautiful story about Michael and my son, David was there, present. That's the Bashir filming. And he no longer allowed me to be around Michael because he was afraid that I was going to tell Michael about everything. Everything that the children were undergoing by his, I don't know how to classify it, evil demonic ways. She calls the ex-husband demonic. Didn't Mr. Snedden tell you that she refers to Michael as the devil? Continuing in this interview, Janet Arvizo, and that one day the kids and me were going to tell Michael. So only one time I went with David up there when he was and me and Michael were dancing. Just dancing. We were approximately, maybe like 20 feet from each other and we were dancing to the same song. And when we were taken back into that room, that's why the rest of the trip Michael never saw me again. I was beaten up. She says she was beaten up inside the guest room by her ex-husband at Neverland. Were police called? No. Were complaints made? No. Did anyone hear about it? No. Were security yards contacted at Neverland? No. Kitchen staff, zookeeper, management, administration, fire truck operator? No. And me, because I knew that Michael was going to help us. I knew he was going to protect us, as any loving father would, as any head of household. Because that's how I see Michael, as a family man. He's a family man. The investigator looks at Gavin, and he says, Gavin, tell me about when you would spend the night with Michael. Where would you sleep? I spent the night with Michael one time when he slept on the floor. He says his brother and he slept on Michael's bed. Michael slept on the floor. And Michael slept on the floor. Michael slept on the floor. When I had cancer, he would sleep on the floor. And my brother would be there with me. Was there ever anything inappropriate with Michael? Janet. Never. Davlin, the sister, says the following. He's a bigger father to all of us. He's given us safety. He's given us love. He's given us everything we've ever wanted. He's been our father figure. He's the only thing we know to be a father. Michael Jackson is being sucked in. And look what happens when you try to sever the connection and not take responsibility for this family for the rest of your life, after you were kind enough to help them when they were in need. Janet Arvizo. And being what I endured for 17 years, I would be the most sensitive to any little thing. And Michael has never, absolutely never made me feel, in any way, form or shape or matter, that anything was different, other than Gavin, as a son to Michael, Star as a son to Michael, Davlin as a daughter to Michael. And Michael father, like a father to all three of them. And to me, family. We, my kids and me, know rejection. We know neglection. We've been rejected, neglected, spit on, fried, tried, burned, abused, the doors shut in our face, opportunities lost. And Michael said, took us from way behind in the line and pulled us up to the front, and said, you matter to me. You may not matter to many people, but you matter to me. And that's what's important. The prosecutor wants you to think this was all scripted and done through force at the major's home. The major in the United States Army. Janet talks a little bit about her life, ladies and gentlemen. That obviously is going to be an issue in this courtroom. She says David, her ex-husband's older brother, is a convicted drug dealer. She says she would get beatings because I wouldn't participate in drug activities or drug sales. I got beat up for things I stood for. Always leading up to, Michael has rescued us from destruction. We are his family. He is responsible for us. As I mentioned to you, that was February 16, 2003, 3 days after the recorded phone conversation. Now we go to February 20th, 4 days later. We will prove to you that Janet and the kids did a video, freely, voluntarily. They wanted it. The kids wanted to be on camera. They wanted to be actors. The mother wanted to be on camera. The hitch was they wanted lots of money. They arrived at the home of the videographer in Los Angeles. We will produce witnesses who will tell you that Janet seemed happy as a lark, excited and interested, but delayed it so she could talk to someone whom she thought was an attorney. She didn't want to sign a document releasing rights. She wanted rights. She wanted money if they were going to be filmed. So they went through a lot of discussion like that. No false imprisonment, no abduction, no force, nothing like that. She was laughing and giggling throughout the video, as you will see. You will see her laughing during the filming. And you will see her laughing with her kids when they think they're not being filmed. She goes through the same routine I just read to you. The same victim routine. We were spat on because of our race, our poverty. Nobody would help us. We shared cereal. We were going nowhere, words to that effect. And Daddy Michael rescued us. Took us into his fold, became the surrogate father. And they all praise him to the hilt. This is February 20th. They praise him for all he has done to help Gavin with his illness. They praise him for all he has done to help them enjoy life. But implicit in everything she says is, we are now his family. He is now our dad. Again, while she's living with Major J. Jackson of the United States Army. Again, she says, this is all part of the false imprisonment. And as I said to you yesterday, when you see this tape, and if they don't show you, we will, just watch the responses. Watch the facial expressions. Watch the spontaneity in the Arvizos. Watch Davelin shed tears about wonderful Michael is. Watch Gavin praise him for being a father figure. And say to yourself, is this whole family rehearsed because there's a gun to their head? Absolutely, positively no. She does bring religion in, I'll tell you that. She says that, God's grace as God works through people, so does the devil. But God elected to work in Michael to breathe life into Gavin and to my 2 other children, and to me a much necessary love in a very traumatic time in our life. On, and on, and on. The next morning, she's interviewed by the Los Angeles Department of Children and Family Services. Now, the prosecutor told you that this was all under the gun too, because there was some security guy imprisoning them or stopping their movement or stopping them from calling someone on a telephone. Did they ever tell the interviewers from the Los Angeles Department of Children and Family Services, we're being held against our will, my children are being abducted, I'm being falsely imprisoned, we are prisoners of Michael Jackson? No. They sang his praises again. And you know something. Actor Chris Tucker, from the Rush Hour series, Girlfriend was there too. Did they ever look at her and say, please, sneak a call to the police? Call 911. Do something. Help us. We're being restricted. No. After they realized the effect of these interviews, after they realized it might be a tough sell, that this is all scripted and done by force, that's when the dates of the alleged molestation changed to after these interviews. Gavin has said to the police on one occasion it was before the DCFS interview, and then changed it to it was after. How come? How come? The day after those interviews, Ms. Arvizo went to a lawyer named William Dickerman. She had concluded that she had been duped by Schaffel, Dieter, Konitzer, Frank, Vinny. She had concluded she was not going to get a piece of the action from any rebuttal show, which, as you know, was supposed to be a response to the Bashir documentary. And as I said to you yesterday, yes, there was concern over Michael being placed in a false light, and Bashir. But also these people saw great money-making opportunities, because you could do another show and the networks were bidding for the other show. She decided she wasn't going to be able to obtain what she wanted and now it was time to take legal action. She had the lawyer send a series of letters to Garrigus. And they started coming. First of all, she was upset that she was joined with Michael as a complainant. A plaintiff in a British lawsuit against the company that produced the Bashir documentary. Because as I said to you yesterday, we will prove Michael was duped by Bashir. Didn't want his children revealed so you could recognize them on the show, thought he had editorial control, and trusted Bashir. Janet claimed to be upset that her son was on the show. In reality, we'll prove, she wanted money from the show. That was the problem. She had joined Michael Jackson in a suit in England with Michael Jackson paying the fees. And it was done through Legrand, his lawyer who I mentioned before, who had obtained legal counsel in England. She decided, I'm not going to get much out of any of this. So she went to this lawyer and he starts writing letters to Mr. Garrigus, saying she wants her property back, which is in storage. At her request, her property was taken from the studio apartment, put in storage. Her back rent was paid by these people who were helping her out, because she wanted to go to Brazil, and she always complained, I want to live in a nicer place. In fact, her daughter stated to one witness, we're going to get a nice home in the Hollywood Hills. Her fiancé and now husband complained, we want more than a house out of this. We want more than a college education out of this. You guys are making millions. What are we getting? She wanted out of that location. What she decided to do when she thought she couldn't make money the friendly way was to make money through lawyers the hostile way. And Dickerman started sending letters, we want her furniture back, we want her possessions back, as if Michael Jackson wanted to steal her furniture and possessions. But nevertheless, he also said, we don't want Mr. Jackson's people hassling her, harassing her. Interestingly enough, the letters keep coming, and there's never any mention of child molestation. Not in any of these letters. Those claims evolved with time. In late March, Janet Arvizo bumped into one of the Department of Children and Family Services workers who had interviewed her at a hamburger place, late March 2003. Never mentioned sexual misconduct, false imprisonment, extortion, child abduction, giving alcohol to minors for sexual purposes. Never mentions any of this stuff. Sees her at a public place. March 26. Lawyer Dickerman contacts Mark Garrigus and never mentions sexual misconduct. It's in April of 2003 that Janet Arvizo goes to lawyer Larry Feldman. On April 16 of 2003, the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department closes their case investigating Michael Jackson. They conclude no criminal activity has gone on. In May of 2003, that's May 15, Larry Feldman, who, as you know, has sued Michael Jackson before, gets Janet and the children to talk to a psychologist that he uses as an expert witness in other cases. In other words, lawyers often will have experts they want to use and the experts get paid, and they're kind of in bed together. Not until May 29, 2003, does this psychologist suddenly claim he has a reasonable suspicion there was molestation. I repeat the date, May 29, 2003. She hires attorney Feldman in April. It's not till the very end of May that they come up with these false claims. On June 5, 2003, the psychologist meets with lawyer Feldman and lawyer Dickerman. They're all collaborating. Doesn't go to the police. Janet doesn't go to the police. The kids don't go to the police. Psychologist Katz and lawyer Feldman go to the Los Angeles Department of Children and Family Services on June 13 to report this. I'd like you to hear this one, ladies and gentlemen. On September 30, 2003, Lieutenant Klapakis from the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Office calls the Los Angeles Department of Children and Family Services and doesn't want them to interview the Arvizos. I repeat, doesn't want them to interview the Arvizos. They already had. On March 29, 2004, Janet Arvizo testifies under oath before a grand jury in Santa Barbara and says she learned for the first time about the molestation from the police. That, we will prove, is false. Ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be a long trial and you're going to see and hear lots of evidence. We are extremely confident that, when you do, you are going to find Michael Jackson absolutely not guilty of any of this. Thank you. Backquote.
Thank you, Mesereau.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We'll take our morning recess. Remember the admonition.